Alright guys, so it's the next day, and I did a little bit more studying, read up on some stuff in some forums and whatnot, and learned a few things that I didn't know yesterday. Okay, so I am now convinced that, in fact, this shaft has a splined end that goes into this hub right here on this part, which they call a PTO flywheel assembly. There's actually supposed to be a shield over this that's missing. That's what these plastic wing nuts that I saw on the side here are for. They're for a shield. This rubber boot right here, its job is to hold grease inside this area where the spline shaft is. There's a grease fitting right here. That's what this rubber boot is for. This rubber boot right here, of course, keeps water from being able to come into here. So this is completely shredded. We already knew about that, right? This is a special bearing that allows basically the shaft to be able to turn without turning the rubber boot, which would tear the rubber boot to smithereens. There's also a grease fitting on this. This can now be moved all the way over, so I can see the remnants of the grease or whatever that they put in there. Sometimes this will seize on this shaft. If that happens, when you go to pull the pump unit out, by design, what they intend to happen is they intend this drive shaft to come out with the pump unit as you're withdrawing the pump unit from the back, and they expect it to pull out of here. If this is seized onto your shaft, then of course this will hit here and you will have a really hard time getting that out. So you have to come up with a way to pull that out, basically get this to unseize from this. Luckily mine is moving. So before you can pull this whole shaft out this way, you've got to take this boot off. This boot is held on with these clamps. This type of clamp is called a Oetiker clamp. Now that's spelt Oetiker after the manufacturer. Some say Oetiker. If you go online and try and find the correct pronunciation, you might get Oetiker, or you might even get Oetiker or Oetiker. Go figure. So, I even saw a distributor referring to it as Oetiker. So, I'm going to go with Oetiker. I'm going to try and keep that name alive. So the thing about these clamps are, by design, they're actually made to be able to be released, to be taken off, and reinstalled. They're reusable clamps. This type of clamp is very popular in the beverage industry. So like hose connections in like distribution units in like, those big commercial soda fountains you see in like fast food restaurants probably use a lot of these, and yada yada yada. Anyways, the point is, you should be able to take this clamp off and reuse it. The great thing about that is these clamps are not cheap. Also, if we can save this boot isn't cheap. And again, this is a basket case. We may never get anywhere with this. So the longer it takes before we get to committing good money into this thing, the better for me. So what I want to try and do is I want to try and take these clamps off to take this boot off. I still think that if this shaft is not seized into this spline, which I don't think it is because I can actually see it wiggle when I move the motor, I still think I can take the motor out and leave the drive unit in. I really don't want to get involved with the drive unit until I see whether or not this motor has a prayer of being usable. So this motor is seized solid. There are special tools. There's actually a Seadoo part number for a special pair of pliers to actually remove these clamps. The funny thing is, the special clamp, the special part number for the clamp, Seadoo, expensive. The clamp pliers, special pliers, extremely expensive. However, once you realize that this is an Oetiker clamp, now you can find how to remove Oetiker clamps and how to buy Oetiker clamps. These are sized in millimeters, I believe, which is going to really help out on savings if I do have to buy a new one. However, I was on Oetiker's website last night and saw a video where they claim that these clamps can be removed with water pump pliers. These channel locks right here are commonly referred to, this style is commonly referred to as a water pump plier. So supposedly, you're supposed to be able to just grab onto this like this and actually get this to unclip. Now the problem is, right now, where it's oriented, it's kind of hard for me to see. So I would like to rotate this shaft so that this part right here is facing up and make my life a lot easier. And I can't even see it all on this one. This one actually looks like it might not be a reusable one. This might, I don't know, we'll have to turn it around. Because Oetiker also makes a style of clamp like this that just crimps on and it's a one-shot deal. Once you crimp it on, it's basically on there and then you got to cut it off. And of course, it's very hard to cut that off without damaging this boot. Problem is I can't rotate this shaft because the motor's seized. So what I've decided to do, since the spark plugs are already loose anyways, is I'm going to open up this motor by taking the spark plugs out. And I'm going to spray some thrust penetrant down inside the spark plug holes and let it sit just for a little bit. And then I'm going to put a pipe wrench on here, which it looks like maybe somebody already did because there's all this paint missing. Or they had channel locks or something they were trying to grab onto that with. And I'm going to try and rotate this motor. And I'll let that sit for a couple minutes. All right, let's see. Oh man, that's horrible. Oh, wow. All right, just for giggles, let's try and go in the other direction. Oh, that's interesting. Then it actually rotates in that direction. Oh, I see the nipples in the way. Oh, nope, it rotates very little, but it rotates. Could be something like a broken connecting rod. Could be something in the rotating valve mechanism. Could be catastrophically broken. It's jamming this up. Because this is only turning a little bit and then stopping. Well, let's see if maybe I can get on this thing now with those pliers. So that, I believe, is what it hooks onto. So I think I had the plier jaws on there by mistake. I need to squeeze this, and on the underside here where you can't see, there's a lip. I think I got to grab onto those two things and then get it to pop off of that. Yeah, that ain't working. All right, I was able to get the engine to rotate after working it back and forth. I finally got it to free up. Not before it made some really bad crunching noises that make me think I'm going to find something kind of catastrophic inside that rotating valve assembly, which there'll be more on that later when I get this motor out and on the bench. But I was able to get this clamp off. Unfortunately, I think I broke it in the process. First time trying to get them off. So kind of bent this up because what ended up happening was this little tab right here, I tried to pinch between that and here. So I tried to grab onto right there with the jaw and then onto here with the jaw, this little tab, and fold it over. I now look at this and realize, in fact, it's right here is where you're supposed to grab. So now that I got it out and I can look at it better, you know, hindsight being 20/20, it's between here and here. So I'm supposed to grab with the pliers like this. I'll tell you, that's why they get special pliers for these, because it's kind of dicey. So what I ended up doing was, my workaround was to just get a screwdriver underneath the end here and pop this up off of the little tab here, this little hook that it hooks onto. So I kind of bent it back now, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to reuse this or not. I might have to just invest in a new clamp. Again, this is small potatoes. I'm certainly not going to go running right out and order a new clamp for that thing. I mean, this motor might be completely junk. So I was just futzing around on this clamp with the pliers and it popped open. So maybe that is a reusable clamp. I saw on one forum where a couple different people said that you could just use a nylon wire tie here, a cable tie right here, in place of this clamp. But that the larger one, of course, you need something on there. And then there was a discussion about, well, why can't you just use a regular hose clamp? And I guess it has something to do with the possibility that at the high RPMs we're dealing with here, that screw, that the high RPMs, it could cause a balance problem. So I don't know. But if I have to, like I said, I'll just source one of those clamps later. So now, with this clamp off, I tried to move this boot off of here, only to find that this diameter right here is, I can feel it, this diameter here, underneath this part of the boot, is significantly smaller than this diameter. So this boot does not want to go off that way. But the boot freely turns on the outside of this PTO flywheel assembly now. There's all that grease in there, you can see it. So now, I'm wondering whether or not I could try, like I did the other night, try and pull this motor off of that shaft. Alright, so I don't know why, but I can't get this motor to move forward far enough to disengage that shaft. There's something that it hits that's holding it up. I don't know if it's something down underneath here, underneath this housing in the front, which I think is the magneto housing. I don't know if that's hitting something under there or what. And whatever it is that it's hitting, I can't lift it up high enough to get over that obstacle, because the shaft just doesn't want to lift up any. Probably because of the bearing that supports it inside there or whatever. So I've got to abandon this attempt and just go about it the way that it's supposed to be done and work on removing this pump. So there are 3 hoses down here that need to be disconnected. I already disconnected this one. That was a hose clamp. These 2 are held on by just plastic wire ties. And I think these are called the bilge hoses. These are supposed to be responsible for, I think, keeping water buildup in the bottom of the hull. Basically pumping water out of the bottom of the hull that leaks through and get it out of the system. If those hoses have been on as long as mine have been, they're really seized onto those nipples, so it's just better to cut them off. They'll be a little short, but there's enough extra hose that I can put them back on later and should be fine. And then use a utility knife and carefully slice these to get them off of the nipples. Because you don't want to go pulling on them really hard or anything like that, because you might crack one of those plastic nipples off of the drive, off of the pump housing, and that would be bad. Alright, now so in theory now, this whole unit's supposed to come off and pull out. We got it all the nuts have been removed and everything. I can wiggle it a little bit, so I think the seal is partially broken free, but it just doesn't want to come. So now I need to rig up a way to pull this out. And there's a couple different ways people have done it online. But most of the ways involve being able to attach to this housing through the threaded holes here that will be left behind once I take this part off. So I've got to take these 4 bolts out, get this out of my way, and then come up with a plan. Well, I tell you, these 4 bolts, you should be real careful with these. 2 of them weren't too bad, but 2 of them were really seized. And so I was real careful with them. Once I broke them free, just like 1/8 of a turn, I then turned them back in a little bit. It's a little trick I do to try and clear the threads. And I was able to get them out. The whole time I was repeating the mantra, please don't break, please don't break. And that seemed to work. This is the last of them. Wonder how bad this is stuck on. Look at, I don't know if you can see that or not, if I'm in frame there, but there is just powdered corrosion just falling out of that hole, that bottom one. There we go. Okay, so now the idea is I need to fashion some sort of a bracket that I can screw into these two holes, but will clear this cone right here. I mean, I guess I could take that off, but I don't want to. I want to leave that all together. So let's see what I can come up with. That's the ticket. All right, so one of the things that I saw a warning about was to make sure that when you pull this out, you don't lose this bumper that's supposed to be on like the very end of the shaft. And I don't see that, so maybe that's still in the splined area up inside there. I'll look for that. But I'll tell you, what I'm very interested about is this right here. I don't think that's supposed to be there at all. I don't know if that's supposed, is that supposed to be some sort of... So if I look down inside here, when I pull that drive shaft out, of course this slides off and falls off. And this rubber boot. There's the other clamp. I do not see the little bumper. Don't really feel anything in there either. I don't know. Well, I just looked at the parts breakdown of the drive shaft assembly, bearings and all that. And there's nothing to indicate anything being on this shaft, so I don't know what this is. It sure as heck seems like something that melted onto the shaft. I mean, I wonder if this is, could this be some kind of foreign matter, material that somehow got into the system? It sure feels like plastic. Feels like plastic, but it looks like heck. So you can see the signs that this has been rubbing and melting and burning in there. Well, the good news is now that this other end is pulled out of the pump drive, I could see that the rubber bumper, what it looks like, and turns out the other one was right there the whole time and I just didn't see it. Alright, so looks like the only thing I need to do now to take this motor out is there are 3 lines still attached. There's that line over there with the filter on it that comes from the oil tank. That must be the supply. Then there's another line that goes to the oil tank on the top. It almost appears like a return line or a vent line or something. It goes over to the engine though. And then last is this line right here goes to the somewhere under the manifold over here and goes back to, well, goes back to that exhaust. So I don't know. I'm gonna tilt the motor on its side so I can get to those two lines on the left. Well, I just learned a lesson. The water line came off, no problem. But this line that goes up to the top of the oil tank, I took this off and oil started coming out of it because there's quite a bit of oil, I guess, still in that tank. So I just lifted this up to a high point so that oil would stop coming out of this, but then I didn't realize until I saw oil running over here, oil was coming out of the engine. So it's going through the engine. So I've got to take off that line that goes to the bottom of the tank, the low point line. I got to take that off first, I guess. Another oil line. 3 lines from the oil tank. Oh, I wonder if this is an oil pump. Bet you this is an oil pump. Yeah, that makes sense. So we got one big line coming off the bottom of the tank, feeding oil into this oil pump mounted on the side of the motor. Then a small line coming out of that. Why would that go back up to the tank though? Oh, I'm sure I'll figure this all out eventually. Oh, looks like there's a lot of oil inside that motor. Still gonna be a tight fit. Getting this out of here. Oh man, oh man. You see some hardware laying in the bottom there. So I was just trying to wrestle that thing out of there, and it's a very, very tight fit still. Not a lot of room. If I take the exhaust manifold off, that might work, but I really don't want to deal with trying to take those possibly seized bolts out. Carburetor, if I get that off, that would give me a little bit of room, but I just turned it vertically and noticed that when I went to pull it out, the only thing that was getting caught was just the very top of this temperature sending unit that was screwed into the head. There's also a stud sticking up, but I think I can make that clear. So I just unscrewed this sending unit. I'm hoping that is going to be all I had left that I needed to do to get this to come out. Well, I think I solved the mystery of that weird plastic-like substance that's all wrapped around the shaft, melted. Look over here at this end of the pump, the drive unit. There's a big chunk of the this liner missing here. More pieces missing here. It's in really bad shape. And I believe this is called a wear ring. So I think by design, when you get sand and dirt and stuff that gets pulled in through here, it will abrade this ring and cause this ring to wear in an effort to sacrifice itself to try and keep this impeller intact. So I don't know if this is just from age, if these break down like this one, or what. But my theory is that a big chunk of this ended up coming off and getting in there. I don't know. Well, the weird thing is, why would it be on the shaft way up there, since everything propels it out this way? Unless this was run dry, you know, out of the water, and somebody was just running it without water hooked up to it. Well, that would be bad.